Welcome to my channel, Knitting, Books, etc. My name is Cristina and I come to you from Lisbon, Portugal. Today I'm here to do a tag and it's called, I'm checking in my phone, it's the Philosophy of Reading Tag, and it was created by Brandon from Brandon's Bookshelf. It's one of my favorite channels that I recently subscribed, and I think it's a great tag. I also have already seen Tom from Tom LA Books. He did this tag, and it's a great tag, great answers that he gave. I am not 100% as articulate as Tom is, and also sometimes I have difficulties in expressing my thoughts, actually in organizing my thoughts and expressing them. So this is not going to be like Tom's answers, but I'm going to try and do my answers. What comes to my mind when I read these great questions? It's a tag all about books, of course, but it's in this case it's very much about books and the reading process. Question 1. What's the most important? A good character, plot, or message? And it's very difficult for me to answer because it depends on the book. And there are books where the message is what's important. There are books where, for example, I have just finished to read a book which is number 1 in a trilogy. The trilogy is called First Law and the writer is Joe Abercrombie. It's a fantasy book, and the first book, it's called The Blade Itself, has almost no plot. I am not complaining because I think that some people said that nothing happens in the book. It's not true. For me, things happen, but what's great about the book is the great characters it has, and also something that I like, it's to be inside the character's head. So we have at least, I think there are 6 points of view, and we see the point of view of these 6 characters, and they are all great. Plot, of course, it depends on the book, because, for example, there are books, for example, mystery books, or even where, of course, the plot is very important. But for me, everything is important, truly, and language too. Okay. Number 2, should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? Yes, of course, because how will we learn if we may have our own convictions about something, and if we don't open our minds to new ideas, doesn't mean that we have to accept those ideas. Sometimes it's even good to know if it's an important issue where we have strong beliefs, and we want to know what the enemy thinks about. What I mean is that we want to understand others, and sometimes we do understand them while not agreeing with them. And also sometimes we need to learn, so we would be very close-minded if we didn't open our mind to other ideas. Number 3, as tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? The role of books as a means to enjoyment, a means to learning, I don't know. I think that books will always be important. Things have changed a lot since written language was created, but still people read, either in stones, in papyrus, in books, in e-books. I think that we will always read books. If we are talking about books as in the physical book, I hope they will last forever. I like to read physical books a lot, but I do read other means. I don't know what will be, if they will last. I hope they will. How important are summaries, review, and art in your book choosing? So art is important. I also like good covers, and even illustrations. I love Victorian literature, and one of the things I love are the illustrations of those books. So they make or they enhance the pleasure of reading. Also, what was it? Summaries and reviews. I Summaries. I don't read summaries before I read the book because I avoid spoilers. At least before I read the book for the first time, I don't even read introductions and other people prologues. But I read them afterwards. And reviews, yes. For example, in booktube I write. I like to listen to people's recommendations, and some very often I take them in mind. In if Because I am I'm very coward in the books I choose to read. I think that I don't have much time to read as much as I wanted, and I need to be choosy in what I read. Not that I'm very particular, because I like to read a lot of genre, so I'm open to lots of things, but I don't want to lose much time with books that are not good. So I prefer, not that I may dislike the book in the end, but I normally, it's rare that I, for example, DNF a book because I don't like it, because it's rare that I pick a book that I don't like, because I do listen to recommendations and I can more or less assess if I'm going to like a book or not. That being said, I'm also sometimes, for example, I find it very difficult to resist buddy reads and things like that, now that I have been in booktube and watch other people's videos. So I am, and I think it's good, because it's like I say that this is like colors. If I am the one choosing, I always choose green. I cannot resist green, a green color in yarn. So sometimes I let other people choose for me, because otherwise I would always pick green. It's the same with books. I like recommendations, and I like other people to, for example, pick a buddy read or a book that I read along, because otherwise I wouldn't know about the book, or perhaps I wouldn't choose because it wouldn't be what I think I would like. So sometimes I do like that. It's the only way I can vary a bit and even learn about new books and new authors for me. Should one ever skim or scan a book? It depends on the book. If it's a book that we are studying, I learn that a good way of learning the contents of a book like those is to start by skimming and scanning the book before reading. If it's just, or of course, if it's just something that we are looking for the answer to particular questions we have in a reference book, or and one of those types of books, non-fiction mainly, of course. Now, if it's a fiction book that we want to read, I don't do that unless it's my, I don't know, 100th reread and I'm looking for a particular quote. But if I'm reading it for the first time, I like to enjoy the whole book and read everything, okay? Should a reading always be enjoyable? Yes, for me. What I mean is that, of course, in school we sometimes had to read and sometimes we are forced to read. I don't think it's very good to be forced to read, although some people would never know how good read is if they hadn't been forced to read in school. I don't know. But so sometimes it can be a chore to read certain books. Now that I can choose what I read, I think that whatever, of course, sometimes books can be difficult, and they can um, make us work to read them, but that doesn't mean that they are not enjoyable, because for me that effort to read a difficult book, sometimes there are books that we have to, or I have to reread certain chapters several times to understand them or to get a bit of what I'm reading, and that can be a chore, but that's part of my enjoyment of the book. So other books, as if it's a light novel or a mystery book or something, I can read. I remember when I was a kid, I read. I have already said that here very often. I read hundreds of books by Enid Blyton, and I remember that one day I read 4 books in a row. I remember also my eye doctor being angry at me because he said that I had ruined my eyesight because of that. So, but what I mean is that every type of book has been somehow an enjoyment for me. I also would read I have 3 older brothers, and they would attend school while I was still in kindergarten, but I didn't go to kindergarten, I was at home. And that I would pick their books, science books, biology books, lots of school books, and I would read because I would love to read. So I learned to read by myself alone when I was 4, and I would always pick their books and read. So every type of book has always been an enjoyment. And now, 7. Is it important to be well read? For me, it's not an absolute necessity, but I think that well-read people, I love books so much and I love reading so much that I think it's huge to be well-read, because also the enjoyment of reading is, I think there is a ratio of more enjoyment the more you read books, and especially those classic books, because books are always referring to other books. For example, the Odyssey, hundreds of times I read in other books references to the Odyssey. Reading the Odyssey will enhance my pleasure in reading all the other books. Sometimes even in certain songs, the lyrics of certain songs, they refer to things that if I didn't know what they were, of course I could still enjoy them, but I think that my enjoyment is always enhanced the better read I am. So for me it's very important. Other people, I tend not to I don't like to judge other people. I think that people are free to do as they want. So if they want to read, they should. If they don't want, they shouldn't. I don't care. Although, of course, I think that, and sometimes people can be very intelligent and smart and even knowledgeable about life without reading a lot. But normally the tendency is to be otherwise. So the better read someone is, also the more interesting that person is, and I like to hear people that know things and that study things and that have learned a lot in their lives. So that's my answer here. If you could download a book to your brain, would you still read? Yes, I think so, because first of all, I like to read the reading itself. I like to look at the letters and the words. I also like audiobooks, but I like to listen to people reading to me in audiobook. They have to be good narrators. Also, I like to have a book. If I'm reading a physical book, the process of reading, the turning of the pages, the smell of the book. I am a book sniffer as well. So everything even looking at the covers of the books in the bookshop, or in if I won't go to someone's house and they have a library, I like to peruse all those books. So everything is part of my enjoyment of books. So I think that I wouldn't like, actually, I don't like the idea of downloading, and unless it's a, for example, if I have some subject for work that I need to read and it's very boring, and I don't like that type of stuff, like even laws, for example. I'm a school teacher and we have to know to read lots of stuff which is quite boring, because there's always new laws about regarding education. So that type of stuff which is quite boring, I wouldn't mind download it and having that knowledge imprinted in my brain. But the other type of books, no, I wouldn't like actually to have that. What are your views on rereading a book? I am a huge rereader. I love rereading books. Again, if I enjoy a book, if I like a book, I want to revisit the book. Also, a good book, that's what I call a classic. Classics are books that they are never finished, in the sense of every time we read, we find something new. So I am a huge rereader. I am forever rereading books. So what makes a book good? What makes a book bad? These are two questions that we can answer. So there are many things that make a book good. Can be, again, good plot, good characters, good for me, good language, in the sense that a well-written book. I hate books with mistakes, especially grammar mistakes, and I'm forever finding that in nowadays, as you know, people can write and publish, auto-publish, I don't know, self-publish, that's the word, books, and I think that sometimes they are careless in having an editor, or even editing themselves the books, I don't know, but I find I'm quite sometimes even scandalized by the mistakes I find. Normally I read in English, as I have already said, because even when it's a translation, I tend to prefer the translations into English. And also those more current or present, the books, the self-published books, I sometimes get them for free in Kindle, and I read them, or I start to read them, and sometimes I find appalling mistakes that I, a non-native speaker, immediately notice them, and that shocks me. I think that a writer, even if it's a new writer that starts reading, they shouldn't allow books to be published full of language mistakes. So for me, language is very important too. So, and of course, sometimes if it's poetry, or I want beautiful language, but the pace of the story. I have also read books where it was visible that the author lost the thread of the book, and they didn't know things about the book. I don't know if when they were writing they stopped and restarted much later, but there's the book itself, the story itself, it's disorganized or doesn't make sense. I love, for example, I think that something that the book has to be cohesive and has to be there's a logic in the book that should be respected, even if it's a fantasy book where there is things have to be coherent in that world, in that fantasy, and not be come out of, I don't know how to explain, but there has to be some order and logic in the story, and sometimes there isn't. So that makes for me makes a bad book. Okay. How do you feel about not finishing a book? When I was young, I couldn't stand that. I was more, I still am kind of obsessive compulsive in certain things, and I didn't want to ever not finish a book. Nowadays, again, I'm older, so I'm more conscious of the little time I have for certain things, or for actually for everything. And so I am not only more careful in choosing what I read, I also, if it's difficult because I think that it's boring, and sometimes it happens, I don't mind at all DNFing a book. So, mm, if you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? That would be very difficult because I like so many different things. Um, but if you could only read one genre for the rest of, I'm going to cheat and say classics because I love books from the old days. Okay, and that's what I tend to choose to read. Even if it's a sci-fi or a fantasy book, I like the old ones in those areas. So I'm going to pick classics. Do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? It happens. For example, if there's an author that I find out that I like, I tend to try and read all the books of that author. So, and I may pick a book without knowing what it is. I think that this would happen more often in the past because nowadays with booktube and bookstagram and everything, I'm always listening to or seeing what other people say about a book, so it's not as normal as it would be in the past. 19. What author, genre, series or culture can you just not get into? Why? This is not 100% true, but I tend not to like literary fiction, current literary fiction. And actually, this is an expression that I didn't know what it was. I never heard about it. I studied literature at university, and I don't remember hearing this expression. But now I think I know what it is, or at least for me, it's a book that it's not a genre book, meaning it's not a mystery, it's not fantasy, it's not whatever. And modern literary fiction for me tend to be boring, very, very boring. I think that when I was young, very young, I used to be very intellectual, and I used to like profound reading and things like that. I would also read philosophy and things like that. Those nowadays I still read some of those, but I tend to read the classics, and they never bored me. The classics and current, the so-called literary fiction tend to bore me a lot. So that's the genre I avoid, unless I know it's a good book. There again, if some I see that people that I normally tend to trust their what they like, and when they say that a book is good, I may pick that book up, but I tend to avoid them because I know that I'm going to be bored about and then when reading starts to be a chore and I don't get much from the book, I prefer not to read it. Do you think everyone should read? Why? Well, I do, because I think that reading for me it's so great that I do think that everyone should read, at least try, because I think that I feel pity. That's the word. I do. I feel pity that people don't know how great reading is. But should everyone be made or to read? No, I think I am I think that people should choose what they want to do with their lives. So, if they don't want to read, okay, that's okay. Again, I feel pity because I find it such a great thing that that's a bit sad that don't uh, they don't have that. But each people should choose what they want to spend their time doing. And so this was the name again, The Philosophy of Reading Tag, 20 Questions About How and Why We Read by Brandon from Brandon's Bookshelf. So I should tag some people. Again, I forgot to think about. So I'm going to tag the guys at the Codex Cantina because they do think about what they read. So this would be a great tag for them. Also, Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, and maybe who? Christy Lewis from the Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space. She also is a great reader, so I think that these three people, that's what I'm going to choose. And I'll see you next tag, at least, because I have so many tags to answer that I would like to answer that. Until then, I'll see you. Bye bye.